Magic and mayhem in the modern world. Sign me up. Urban fantasy is one of the most exciting genres out there, blending magic and action and attitude in a way that no other genre really does for me. Today I'm sharing my top 5 favorite urban fantasy series, books that deliver epic action, compelling characters, and just the right amount of snark. Whether you're new to the genre or a longtime fan, these series deserve a significant place on your shelf. Let's dive in. Hey everybody, I'm Brian. Welcome to BellTube. For me, a great urban fantasy series needs a few key things. It needs a badass protagonist who can throw down but also make you care. It needs a richly built world in our kind of modern world where magic and reality collide. It needs action-packed storytelling with a blend of mystery and humor and, of course, danger. And these 5 series that I'm going to share with you today do all of that and more. So let's get right into it. And here's how I've categorized these today. Like I said, we've got 5 series, and I'm going to do them not in like my top 5 in terms of ranking, but I'm going to do them in top 5 of nicety of the protagonist. Okay, so our number 1 is going to be the nicest of the protagonists. The number 5 is going to be probably the meanest. Maybe like one could say an anti-hero if one would. I don't know why I'm talking like that. Anyway, let's start off with the first series today, and that is going to be Kevin Hearne's Iron Druid series. All right, now if you can imagine a 2,000-year-old druid owning and operating a bookstore in New Mexico, you have the basis for the Iron Druid. The cool thing is our main character, Atticus O'Sullivan, looks like he's in about his 20s, right? So he doesn't look like he's a couple thousand years old. By the way, he has one of the greatest animal companions in any kind of fantasy genre, and that is in Oberon the Wolfhound. All right, so we've got Atticus O'Sullivan. He's a druid, and here's the deal. He's been on the run for the last 2,000 years from a god in the Irish pantheon. So one of the things that I like so much about the Iron Druid, apart from the fact that we don't get a whole lot of druid main characters in any kind of genre of fantasy, one of the things that I like the best is that it really explores primarily the Irish pantheon. As you get into the series, other pantheons that you're more familiar with, you know, the Norse pantheon, the Greek pantheon, they will show up. But really in the beginning, we are really focused on the Irish pantheon. And what's happened here is that our main character, Atticus, has stolen a sword from one of the Irish gods and has been on the run for the last 2,000 years. So yeah, it's pretty fun because right away in the beginning of the first book, he decides to come out of hiding. Druidic powers, to me, are really cool in the modern world because they really blend kind of like an ancient nature-based magic along with the modern sense of reality, right? He's going to bars, he's going to coffee shops. Like I said, he runs a store in New Mexico. So there's just a lot of old meets new in the Iron Druid. But one thing that we know for sure, our main character is out for good, right? He is the quintessential good guy. And so is Oberon, his, lovable animal companion, who, by the way, is, voiced this whole series I did on Audible, and it's all voiced by the amazing Luke Daniels. If you're an Audible listener, highly recommend you check that out. But yeah, so we get so much in terms of the lore and the history of how he became a druid in the first place, right? Who his druid teachers were, and his connection to Mother Earth, because that's really at the heart of what a druid is his deep innate connection with everything that is nature. He can talk to animals, he can talk to really anything in the wilderness, and it's all done through a series of magical tattoos all over his body. The Iron Druid. I can't recommend this series enough if you're looking for a fun taste of urban fantasy. If you're looking for a character that, like I said, is the quintessential good guy, then look no further than Kevin Hearne's The Iron Druid. All right, let's move on to the next one. Now, this next one I know all of you have probably heard of before, but again, we're going in order of nicety, and my second nicest main character of this list today is Harry Dresden. Of course, I'm talking about Jim Butcher's The Dresden Files. Okay, so if you're just, new to fantasy in general, imagine if like Harry Potter graduated Hogwarts, moved to the United States, lived in Chicago, and became a private investigator. That is kind of what you get with Jim Butcher's Dresden Files. We have what starts off to be in book one called Stormfront. Kind of like a monster of the week type of a series where we have Harry Dresden, who is a private investigator wizard for hire, works alongside the Chicago Police Department, and his good friend Murphy, she also works there. They call in Harry Dresden when there's a case that just seems a little bit more supernatural than the mundane world of Chicago, police can handle. Now, we find ourselves growing with Harry Dresden as the cast expands throughout the books. I think I'm current on the series. I want to say there's like 16 or 17 books out right now. And one thing you'll hear a lot about the Dresden Files is that the books do improve each book's, subsequent from the last for the most part. I'll say that book 2, which is called Full Moon, is easily my least favorite of the series, but I would be totally remiss if I did not put, the Dresden Files in my top 10 of all time urban fantasy series. There are amazing characters. We talked about pantheons earlier when we were talking about the Iron Druid series. There's all kinds of pantheons going on in the Dresden Files. In fact, there are even outside the pantheon, beyond our universe, things going on. There's quite a bit with the fairy realm, which I probably should have mentioned in the Iron Druid series because there's that as well. But between the fairy realm and the different pantheons and everything that's going on to Harry's life in Chicago, plus vampire courts, right? Who doesn't like a story with good vampire courts? You've got that in the Dresden Files. And we have some of the most compelling side characters in any fantasy series, period. The Carpenter family. Butters. I don't want to get into any spoilers here, but if you know, this series gets bigger. The scope gets more epic. And by the time we're about book 9 or 10, this is no longer, a random mystery showing up. This is an epic journey that Harry Dresden himself is on, and we follow him, and we grow to love Harry Dresden, and we only want good things for him because at his heart, he is a good person, and he just wants good things for everybody else. Urban fantasy, set in Chicago, a wizard for hire, an incredibly growing author in Jim Butcher, whose works get better and better with each, book in the order for the most part. You cannot miss out on the Dresden Files. I hope if you have not read it yet, you take a strong look. Let's keep going. Imagine you're walking down a London street and you see a shop full of magical items, right? But you don't know if it's a, illusionist shop where maybe you're just buying magical toys so you can do magic with your friends at home, or if those magical items or some of those magical items within that store are actually really true magic items. Now you meet the store owner, and the store owner's got a dark past. And rather than dwelling on his dark past, rather than dwelling on the politics of the world around him, he just wants to operate his magic store in London. Well, folks, I've just described the premise of the Alex Verus series by Benedict Jacka. Yeah, I believe this is a 12-book series. I've read the whole thing, and I will show graphics, up here, up there, everywhere. I love the Alex Verus series. Now, as I mentioned at the beginning, we are going in order of niceness here in our main character. Alex Verus is what they call in this universe a dark mage. All the magicians are called mages, and they're generally categorized in between light mages, which sounds like they're good, right? Or are they? And dark mages, which sound like they're bad, or are they? These are the questions that we begin to decipher in the first book, which is called Fated. And one of the coolest things that I like about Alex Verus is that he knows very well the type of upbringing he had within the magical system. He knows intimately well that his teacher, a man named Richard Drock, is about one of the most reviled and feared dark mages on all of, not only in the UK, but in all of the world. And so where does that leave our protagonist, right? He grew up with the worst of the worst around him. He sort of wants to be a good guy, but it's in his inner nature to look out for himself, to look out for number one, to look out for Alex Verus. This becomes challenging when he starts to meet some new characters that he actually cares about for the first time in his life. And how does he reconcile that, right? Of course, we wouldn't be talking about Alex Verus if we weren't talking about his incredible magic power. Yes, in the Alex Verus series, every mage really has one core power that defines them as a mage, and in his case, it's the divination power. Yeah, Alex Verus can see into the future. He can see all possible paths of potential outcomes of his actions, try to play them out in his head, and pick the one that gets to the result that he's looking for. What a cool premise, right? Now, it's been done in other series before, but I have to say, not quite as effectively for me as Benedict Jacka has done here in the Alex Verus series. We've got the light mages, right? We've got the dark mages. We talked about that, but we also have these councils, the light council, the dark kind of council, but they're all kind of off doing their own thing. And how do they mesh not only with each other, but also with the normal governing body of, I hate to use the word muggles because that's from Harry Potter, but how do they manage with, the normal people in society in England and the rest of the world? Because they are very interconnected. The British government is fully aware that there is an entire society of mages in their exact world. Alex Verus does so many cool things. I don't want to get into any book spoilers, but suffice it to say, as those books were coming out, they were day one reads for me. It will take you about probably 2, maybe up to 3 books to get really vested into the series. I know that some people will read book 1 and go, yeah, it was good. It wasn't like the greatest thing I ever read, but it wasn't terrible. It was good. I encourage anybody who's done that before, keep going. Keep going to books 2 and absolutely get to book 3. If for some reason Alex Verus is not hitting for you at book 3, and they are very short books, right? So I'm not asking you to read a 1,000-page tome here, 3 times to make a decision. They're quick. They're like 300 pages. So read the first book. My guess is you're going to love it. If you don't, keep going to 2 and 3, and by then, I suspect you're going to get hooked in the Alex Verus series. Definitely let me know where you land, and let's keep moving to the next one. All right, for this next one, I want you to imagine John Wick jumping out of hell and looking for revenge on everybody that put him there in the first place. Yes, folks, this is the initial premise for one of my all-time favorite urban fantasy series. Of course, I'm talking about Sandman Slim by Richard Kadrey. I'm holding up the final book in the series called King Bullet. I would be holding up book 1, but my youngest niece is actually reading the book right now as we speak, but I will put a graphic of book 1 here. And as you can see, all of the book covers in the Sandman Slim series are very cinematic in nature because that's how these books read. We've got a protagonist, and again, we're doing this on the nicety meter, right? We got to book 3, Alex Verus. He's kind of neutral territory in terms of nicety. Now we're going to get to some of the not so nice people. We're going to get to James Stark, our main character in Sandman Slim. His nickname is Sandman Slim. Why? Because when he was on Earth, he was getting together with a bunch of his fellow magicians with magical powers in the city of Los Angeles. Unbeknownst to him, they worked together to change a magical ritual that they were all doing and directly sent James Stark to hell. He goes down to hell. He ends up fighting in gladiator battles. He ends up learning hell-based magic, and then he ends up becoming the devil himself's hitman. And this is all before page 1 in book 1. That's all backstory, right? When we start book 1, he's crawling out of a garbage can in Hollywood because he's just become the first person ever to escape hell. And of course, his number one motivation now is to use his hellish-based magic that he's learned the whole time he was down there to go find the people that sent him there in the first place and get his revenge. Now, this is a revenge tale like no other. And if you ask yourself, well, why is he so, bad, Brian, on the scale of like a good guy versus an anti-hero? Why is he so bad? And I would ask you the same question. Imagine a bunch of your friends betray you, send you to hell. You have to live there for over, several years, do all the worst things possible, and then you are the first one to break out. I promise it would not be all sunshines and rainbows for you. You'd want revenge too. And I have to say, the grittiness of this series, the action of this series, the compelling cast that James Stark develops around him as these books go on are incredible. I loved every book. Now, there's a couple that I like better than others, mainly because of who some of the villains or the antagonists are in each book. But if you ask, is there an overarching story or is it Monster of the Week? It's absolutely an overarching story, and I think you will love it. Richard Kadrey brings such a sense of imagination, and he combines it with total gritty realism. You're going to get a guy that likes to drink. You're going to get a guy that likes to smoke cigarettes that are actually manufactured in hell. You're going to get a guy who can disappear through any shadow and come out anywhere he wants to through the power of this particular key, and I don't want to give any spoilers away, but he's pretty tricky when it comes to teleportation and all that hell-based magic. I'm telling you, this is a series you do not want to sleep on. Sandman, see what I just did there? I said sleep on and then I said Sandman. That's pretty good, Brian, off the fly. Anyway, Sandman Slim, Richard Kadrey. You got to read this book. Let's keep going. Our fifth series we're talking about today has the most anti-hero of any anti-hero I have ever read, especially in urban fantasy, but really in all of fantasy. And we're talking about Stephen Blackmore's Eric Carter series. So why is it, all the anti-hero? Number one, there is not a drug that's ever been invented that Eric Carter doesn't want to do. There's not a sex scene ever invented that Eric Carter isn't, afraid of doing. There is not language in any kind of book, particularly in urban fantasy, which can get into some modern, pretty, challenging language for people that like their language real clean. You're not going to find that here. You're going to find an anti-hero that swears constantly, drinks constantly, does tons of drugs. If there's sex available, he'll probably be there too. And he's a necromancer, and necromancy in this particular universe is very rare. Being a magician is sort of rare enough, but being a Los Angeles-based necromancer, well, it basically got him run out of town. I'm not going to give you any spoilers, but in book 1, we find our hero, Eric, he's not even really a hero, we find our main character, Eric Carter, coming back to Los Angeles after being gone for at least a decade, maybe even more, to investigate the murder of his sister. And all hell literally breaks loose. This guy ain't Mr. Nice Guy at all. He is haunted by basically Santa Muerte, which, if I'm getting my Mexican pantheons correctly, sort of like Lady Death. And that's another really cool thing about the Eric Carter series. You do not get the typical pantheons. You're not talking Norse and Greek, and I talked about Irish earlier. We're not getting that either. We are getting Aztecian, yeah. We're getting Aztecian pantheons. We are getting South American pantheons. We're getting Mexican pantheons. We are getting groups of gods that we're not finding anywhere else, and these are not very pleasant gods to begin with, and neither is Eric Carter. And when they collide, It's just insanity. It's extremely fast-paced, I should say. It's funny as hell if you like very dark humor, if you like revenge stories, if you like an anti-hero that will suffer no BS from anybody, doesn't walk around with a smile on his face, he's mad as hell that he's in this, kind of situation to begin with, then Eric Carter is gonna be for you. But again, I'm gonna give every trigger warning on this series possible. If any of what I described kind of sounds not great for you, then avoid the series. But if you're someone like me that can handle the TVMA rating, that can find out what happens when somebody who's already kind of a nut job gets driven even over the line and what happens, then Eric Carter is absolutely worth your time. There's audiobooks available. I happen to read them on ebook. That's why I'm showing you the cover right here of book 1. Let me know what you think of Eric Carter if you check it out. And that's going to get me to a very short one for the road today. And because we're talking about urban fantasy, where we are living in our modern world, we're living in today's world where there's magic. This is the shortest one for the road we're ever going to find, and that is for you to be on the lookout for magic in your own life. Look for those coincidences that maybe just seem a little coincidental at the time, but as you reflect on it, maybe that there's a message out there that something somewhere wants you to know about, and I'm going to just leave it at that. I'd love to know in the comments, if you're an urban fantasy reader, what are some of your urban fantasy favorites? If you're not, and this is really your first introduction, which of these 5 series sound the most like something you would like to get started with? Let me know in the comments. I will meet you there. I love, as you can see, talking about urban fantasy. It's absolutely one of my favorite genres of all time. That's what I've got. Everybody stay positive, and of course, here's your fortune.